water is the life support system of this earth. It's what makes everything possible. The earth's surface is 75% water, similar to our bodies are that percentage water, and even some of our organs like our lungs are 90% water. So without water, we can't even breathe. And what we know about ourselves is that with 3 days without water and we don't make it. We can go much longer without food, and our plants are much the same. And so water is vital, and it's important that we make sure that there is water around for years and years to come. And so water retention is all about holding as much water in our landscape systems so that future generations can benefit from those systems and be able to grow their food as well. So the oceans are 97% of the Earth's water. That's most of the water on the Earth is salt water. And then the remaining 3% is fresh water. So that might seem shocking to you or not. To me, that's a little shocking that the percentage isn't a little bit more. So that means that there's a very small fraction of water that's available for us to use to water our vegetable gardens. And if you look at that 3% of fresh water, so much of it is in a frozen state in glaciers and ice caps, and then some of it's in the groundwater, and then there's this little teeny bit, this 1%, that's accessible surface fresh water, and that's what's available as a means to naturally irrigate our crops. And then if you dive into that 1% though, so much of it is in our lakes and in our rivers and in some water vapor. So there's very small percentage, just 38%, that's in soil moisture. But remember, that's of the 1% of the 3%. So very small percentage of water that's actually available to us. So we want to conserve as much as possible and be very aware of our water usage. And I wanted to take a moment to link water retention, the idea of water retention and its importance to global warming and climate change. So this is a slide that is from Brock Dolman, and essentially what this slide says to me is that with global warming, we've been seeing high temperatures all across the globe in the last couple of years. And what's happening is that the earth is sweating as a response. And so essentially what's happening is that when water is in its ice state or in its liquid state, and it basically starts to melt and then it starts to evaporate into the air. And that's what the earth is doing. It's trying to cool itself off. That's what we do when we try to cool ourselves off. We sweat. So as a response of all of this sweating, it means that more and more water is in the vapor state on planet Earth. And what does that lead to? It leads to larger storm events. So larger hurricanes happen. And that's because there's so much more vapor in the air and creating these cloud formations, and these different currents of vapor create different storm conditions, tornadoes, etc. So what does this mean for us growing our vegetables? Well, in the future there will be some changes when we're gardening, and it might not happen all at once, but it's important to understand. So in the future, many crops are going to benefit from increased atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations because that's how they photosynthesize, and they will benefit from low levels of warming in areas where it's cooler. But where temperatures are already high, more warming is going to negatively impact growth and yields, because we know that plants stop growing and stop yielding when they start to get above 86 degrees Fahrenheit and above that. So that's one way in which our gardening is going to shift. And then the other way it shifts, it already has shifted for me, is that these extreme weather events likely reduce crop yields. And being in Brooklyn farming for 5 years, I had 2 hurricanes, a tornado, a hailstorm, and there was one other storm. I'm trying to remember what the other one was. These are things that don't normally happen in Brooklyn. And each time our farm got pummeled and we lost tons of food. So these extreme weather events are going to reduce crop yields over time. The other negative impact is that weeds and diseases and also insects and pests, man, they love warmth. And so those things are all increasing. And so that's going to be something as we move forward that we're going to have to keep our eye on. Then there's 2 things related to livestock that aren't really part of our concern here when we're talking about gardening, and it's outside the scope of this class, but the increased heat and disease and the weather extremes are going to reduce livestock productivity, and that CO2 concentration is tough on some of the crops that feed the livestock. So those are going to negatively impact livestock. And then the biggest thing you might notice, and maybe you've already noticed where you are, is that your growing zone may change and your soil may change as a result of all of these storms and all of this changing weather. So these are things to have our eye on. We don't have to, they aren't going to change overnight, but being able to conserve water and retain as much moisture as we can in our soil will reduce the amount of climate change that is happening. And so that's our contribution.